Well, Prime Minister Modi attacked the UPA government today in a speech to FICCI, where he said banks were pressured to give loans worth thousands of crores to select industrialists in a scam that was bigger than 2G, the coal scam and the Commonwealth Games scams. Now, at a time when the economy is under strain, the Prime Minister also talked about his government's initiatives on reforms, saying that they were formulating policies keeping in mind the need of businesses as well as abolishing archaic laws.
पिछले 3 वर्षों में 21 सेक्टर में 87 महत्वपूर्ण रिफॉर्म इस सरकार ने किए हैं। डिफेंस सेक्टर, कंस्ट्रक्शन सेक्टर, फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज, फूड प्रोसेसिंग, ऐसे कितने ही सेक्टरों में घिसी-पिटी व्यवस्था में बहुत बड़े बदलाव किए गए हैं और इसी का नतीजा आपको अर्थव्यवस्था से जुड़े अलग अलग पैरामीटर्स में आज नजर आ रहा है कि जब सरकार में बैठे कुछ लोगों को के द्वारा बैंकों पर दबाव डालकर कुछ विशेष उद्योगपतियों को लोन दिलवाया जा रहा था। ये यूपीए सरकार का सबसे बड़ा घोटाला था। कॉमनवेल्थ, 2G, कोयला, इन सभी से कहीं जड़ा बड़ा घोटाला ये बैंक के कारोबार से जुड़ा हुआ था।
Well, perhaps many of us were expecting the Prime Minister to directly address some of the more pressing economic issues here at this speech at FICCI. It turned out to be a far more political speech instead. But nevertheless, lots to talk about this evening. Let me first go across to Naina Lal Kidwai, the former president of FICCI. Ms. Kidwai, if you look at the figures that we're seeing that have come out in the last 24 hours, industrial output at a 3-month low, retail inflation at a 15-month high, the Asian Development Bank also cutting India's growth forecast. However, we did see the GDP rebound a little bit in the latest figures. What is your overall sense of where we are today, all these months after demonetization and GST? Do you think that the economy can get back on its feet soon?
Nidhi, I think the economy is certainly getting back on its feet. There's no doubt that there have been shocks in the system which saw GDP drop. The trend is upwards. It may not be as fast as we would like to see, but if you look at estimates on the street for 2018, they're all somewhere in that 7.2 to 7.6 sort of range, which is certainly up from where we have been in the last year. I do believe that we will get to the 8% number in the next 12 to 18 months. It's quite critical that that happens. And it will happen despite global headwinds which impact us, the key one being oil prices, which are clearly not in our favor at the moment. And we have had a huge benefit, which we have reaped in the last 3 or so years, in terms of prices which were in our favor. And that, to some extent, is being reflected in the inflationary cycle right now as well.
What makes you optimistic, though, that that 8% growth can happen in the next 12 to 18 months, despite these global headwinds, as you call them? What do you think is going to propel that growth to 8%?
Yeah, so GST actually, because GST, while it was seen as giving a bit of a knock to the system because of the settling in issues, don't forget GST is something which all of us in industry actually pushed very hard over the years to bring in, because in the long run what GST must do is create a revenue stream for the country where a lot of the leakages along the very leaky pipe we had on tax collections go away. And as more and more people come into the GST net and revenue streams move up, we will have a very robust tax collection system which helps our fisc, which helps government expenditure, all of which helps drive growth. And GST in a simple, clean, well-administered form, all of which teething pains we are seeing right now, will add a percent to 1.5% by all estimates to our GDP. So that benefit has yet to kick in, even while we have had to bear the pain this year.
Okay, interesting. I'd like to go across to economist P.N. Vijay and also M.K. Venu, the founding editor of The Wire, here in the studio with us. Mr. Vijay, so Naina Lal Kidwai is certainly optimistic in the long term, in the next year to year and a half. But, you know, what about the teething troubles that we're still facing with regard to GST, the industrial output, inflation numbers? Politically also, these are tough issues to deal with as you head, you know, closer and closer into the general election.
Yes, I think, frankly, I wouldn't be so optimistic about the economy in the next 12 to 18 months as Naina, for two reasons. One is that oil prices are creeping up fairly inexorably, and around 70 it really starts to hurt India. And we are already seeing huge pressure on the fiscal deficit because of that, and all that is contributing to the inflation. And any hope that we had of the RBI loosening rates is totally gone. In fact, analysts are talking about a rate hike in the next 6 to 9 months. The second and more fundamental reason, Nidhi, is the banking system in India has absolutely collapsed. Today, we have a situation where credit delivery has become negative and mountains of bad debt are there in the banks, and we have had to put about 2.10 lakh crores of taxpayers' money to bail out these banks. And what's happened is we keep bemoaning the lack of private investment in the economy. Today, corporate balance sheets are so stretched that it's impossible for 90% of the groups, apart from the odd Ambani or the Adani, to really think of making large investments. So without private investment, which has shrunk, and private consumption, which is iffy, I don't think the economy is going to rebound just on tax collections, which hopefully will improve.
Well, that's a pretty sort of blunt assessment by you, Mr. Vijay, as you point out the various pitfalls that possibly lie ahead. Venu, I'll just get you to weigh in on that, because these are two very differing perceptions of the way the economy could pan out, and both by P.N. Vijay and Naina Lal Kidwai. You know, we've also been talking extensively about the unorganized sector, and Professor Arun Kumar in particular keeps talking about that after demonetization, we haven't really factored in how badly that unorganized sector has been hit and continues to be.
Sure. And in some sense, that's what P.N. Vijay has pointed out. I agree with him. Barring the odd, you know, the big guys like the Adanis and the Ambanis and the Tatas and SRs, if you go down, small scale industry, even RBI surveys have shown that small scale industry has been hit so badly that they've lost 58% of their sales in the period after demonetization. Now, I don't think they've fully recovered, and even the chief statistician of India, when he came out with GDP figures recently, he also said that they have to collect data on the larger universe of 5-6 lakh odd companies which are unlisted, and they have merely extrapolated based on listed companies, the bigger companies that Mr. Vijay is talking about, and based on that they have come up with a better looking data which shows bottoming out. But I would still wait for the larger universe of small companies, their data to come, and then we will see what is the real, and that's what Professor Arun Kumar has been saying on your channel, that we have to see what kind of recovery are we looking at, and the smaller ones are the ones who are still smarting from the way GST is being implemented. It's not over. The government has taken a lot of steps to make it easy, but Nidhi, we are nowhere near getting a clean GST. And on this, I would believe former RBI Governor Dr. Venugopal Reddy, who's respected across the political spectrum. He's worked with both the governments, and he has made a statement a few days ago that we're looking at 2 years for the economy to claw back to the 8% or thereabouts growth rate. 2 years, he said. 2 years means we are well beyond 2019, beyond the next elections. So.
You're right that we're nowhere near having a smooth GST, which Naina Lal Kidwai says is the key to an 8% growth.
Yeah, theoretically it's good.
It is. Yeah. But Sanjay Jha, I think the point is that a lot of these hiccups were expected when GST was implemented in the way that it was, and therefore, the Congress, which on principle has supported the GST. Don't you think you need to wait and see how this plays out over the next 6 months?
You know something, Nidhi, the big lesson from the GST is that the government should learn that you got to first learn how to walk before you run. And the second point, you know, if you look at a couple of broad economic indicators that universally all economists agree will tell you what is the health of an economy. Look at jobs, look at private investment in terms of the net gross fixed capital formation, look at consumption spending and exports, and you'll find on all these four issues on which I think there is general agreement that they tell you that they manifest overall buoyancy of an economy. I think there's enough reason to feel extremely bearish. I think PN Vijay really frankly hit the nail on the head when he said that the huge tailwind of this oil price bonanza that the government has, on which it actually made substantial savings in terms of its import bill, and it actually taxed you and me to increase its revenue base. But even despite that, Nidhi, a figure that nobody should ignore, that this government by the end of October has exhausted 97% of its projected fiscal deficit. So you are not likely to see any capital spending at all happening from the government. And, you know, for a party, and I think it links to your previous debate, if the entire government is going to be fighting an election campaign, why are we surprised when inflation rises, index of industrial production goes down to 2.2%, and end of day we are still sluggish as we were before? So I think the priorities are wrong. And I think from here on, the economy will be on autopilot because there are several elections coming up. I think this government has virtually given up and said, you know, the economy's fundamental should take it forward. I don't see any new reform coming up. And even GST execution tells you that a great indirect tax reform can be botched up by a government which wanted to do a midnight razzmatazz and all the melodramatic.
No, but you know, you've raised an important point about elections. You raised because we're going to be, Mr. Raja, we're going to be in election mode pretty much all of next year as well. You have a number of state elections. You have the Lok Sabha election. Therefore, that room to do anything bold, and I'm going to take that to the other panelists as well, to do any kind of bold reform, and even your room has been shrunk now with this fiscal deficit the way that it is, that room has shrunk, Mr. Raja.
Firstly, I would like to make some observations. The macro level claims made by the government do not match with the micro level realities in our country. As I understand, our economy is still in crisis. It is in bad shape. The industrial sector or manufacturing sector do not show any significant growth. Farming sector is in a huge crisis. Farming sector, agricultural sector, farmers are committing suicide. The way the farmers are agitating all over the country should be a warning to the government. Small and medium enterprises have been adversely affected after demonetization and even after GST rollout, and millions of our people have lost their livelihood. Mr. Suresh Prabhu goes to WTO and admits that more than 600 million people are in India living below poverty line, and there are reports of starvation deaths in our country, and the Prime Minister made a promise of 2 crore jobs per year. And what is the progress report today? You ask the Prime Minister and the government. That is why we should be realistic. And I agree with some of the learned panelists who said, barring a few the corporate houses, they named Ambani's, Adani's or Tata's, all others have been affected. So Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas finally has been turned out to be corporate house ka saath, business house ka saath. This is what we are witnessing today. Well, even they are talking about bailing out banks. I am finishing it. It is not bailing out banks. To say that it is to tarnish the image of our public sector banks. In fact, it is bailing out the corporate houses. Who are the defaulters? Who are the willful defaulters? Let us be honest to our people, truthful to our people. Who are the willful defaulters? Why they are doing this fraud on our nationalized banks?
To Naina Lal Kidwai, which is that, as PN Vijay was saying, that there is this huge pressure on the fiscal deficit. The banking system, as he put it, has collapsed. Private investment is so difficult to come by for various reasons. Given all of that, you're still optimistic?
Well, I'm optimistic because of the position we are at right now. So is it good or bad that we move the needle to a 7.2 to 7.4, clearly not good enough. We'd like to be at 8 next year. We're not going to be. I think the only difference here is I'm suggesting we get to 8% in 18 months, and I heard maybe P.N. Vijay or someone say 8% in 2 years. The trajectory is positive. If we have issue today, it's with the rate of change. And that rate of change clearly does need to be addressed across a lot of the aspects which some of the panelists have set out. Can we move that needle faster? I think there are ways. One of those has to be that industry investing is important, but industry will invest once excess capacity that was put into place earlier is utilized. And it is not getting utilized because demand pickup has not been at the rate that they were hoping. As capacities get filled, the next investment cycle will happen. And just in a bunch of interviews I've seen over the last couple of days from senior bankers, they have remarked that the credit cycle is coming back. So it's slow, but we are seeing the green shoots of that whole process of industry borrowing, suggesting that there is growth. And in fact, the Prime Minister in his speech also alluded to the growth in the auto sector over the last couple of months. So again, you're seeing a jump back. In many cases, it's happening from a very low level. But given where we were last year, I think suggesting that we move up into the sort of 7.2, 7.4% level is directionally right.
It's directionally right, P.N. Vijay. It may not be as fast as we want it. Naina Lal Kidwai still feels at least it's something. But Mr. Vijay, before we go, the big question I think that's on everyone's mind is really how we're going to generate jobs. And how do you see that issue playing out over the next year or so? Because that's fundamental and that's the most key question everyone asks. Where are the jobs?
See, there's a structural issue in the Indian economy on jobs. Right from the time Narasimha Rao started the reforms, if you look for the last 25 years, the employment intensity of Indian growth has been 0.2 rather, which translated in simple terms means when there is 10% growth in the economy, jobs grow only by 2%. For a comparison, Brazil is 9%, so South Korea is 7.5%. Somewhere we have lost the plot in generating jobs. What happens as economies develop is people move away from agriculture, which is not very profitable. That will happen. But then we should have massive industrialization to compensate for the loss of jobs. We never went into industrialization seriously. We jumped into service sector. So there is no investment which has taken place like China has in infrastructure and manufacturing. And secondly, what's happened is, unfortunately, the PM has chosen a soft route and not done anything about labor laws. Unless we drastically change labor laws, it's going to be very difficult to stop private sector from using contract labor for everything. Then we have a problem. So these are very serious issues, and I really doubt if in an election year like next year, anything is going to be done about these things.
I think that ultimately is going to be the key. How much will there will be to take tough economic decisions, or bold ones certainly, in an election year, and whether those glitches in the GST will get sorted out in time for the GDP to take an even faster trajectory higher than it is now. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us tonight. That's it on the program this evening. We'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow is the second day of polling in Gujarat. We are not conducting an exit poll. However, we are going to be looking at the various exit polls that are coming in from across networks. So you will have quite a lot of analysis to listen to. See you then.